Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. So today we'll discuss more deeply about Informatica Power Center architecture and how the data has been transferred through Informatica tool and how the transformation is performed through the integration service. So we'll learn something about it. So let's start. So as I explained previously in the last session, so this is a brief architecture of Informatica Power Center tool. We have domain and we have some repositories where the data will be stored. And we have few services that is called as Informatica Integration Service and Repository Service. So we have client tools, repository manager, designer, workflow manager, and monitor. We can connect to multiple sources as a flat file and database, and we read the data and transfer some logic and load to the target database or maybe a target file. Now, coming to the loading part. So how the load is exactly happened through Informatica. So as I explained previously, so there is two services. One is repository service and one is integration service. And this repository service mostly used for storing the design and jobs that we created to the repository and fetching these jobs and schedules from the repository. So repository is our heart, like we say, heart of Informatica, I can say. So when we execute any job, that execution takes place through integration service. Now, integration service, it don't run directly. It first validate the job through repository service, then it takes place the whole loading part. Now, how the loading happens? In Informatica integration service, there is two parts that majorly we call it as a load manager and DTM process. So what is DTM process and what is load manager? So load manager is nothing but how the load will happen, how the DTM process will be started. So that is carried about the task of load manager. And then what is DTM? So DTM is data transfer process. So where like Informatica takes place all the transformation logic and it take care about all the loading part and reading part from the sources and writing part to the target. So it builds the queries, it validates the details about job and it load the data to the target. So all the things that happen from the data transfer that is carried through the DTM process. So there are a few tasks that I have identified and list down here. So if you see load manager that performs the locking of the workflow so that every loading happens, so nobody can change the workflow within that period of time. And it will be so Informatica will calling the Informatica job, so you can have some different parameters has been defined for some values setting or some configurations files, so that all the details that required to run a job that can be defined in the parameter file. It will read that parameter file. It will create the workflow log as per defined file name and path, and it will run the workflow task. It will start. It will just start the task so that it is a starting point. You can say it will not exactly execute the loading, but it will start trigger the job to start. So once that is started, so it will identify how many tasks are present in the particular workflow. So based upon the usage and availabilities and capacities, so this load of the individual task that can be performed through different nodes that is available. So suppose I can say like if you have a workflow having 5 sessions and you are running a load balancer and the integration service is designed on top of your grid. So when you run the workflow that if the capacity is available for each node machines, So this particular load manager, it will perform the balancing and it will transfer the job like task, each task to each node. So once everything has been done, then it will gather all the details and put into your completion status. So that is about how it distribute the particular task and jobs to respective nodes. Now, after it is assigning the individual task to individual nodes, then it triggered the DTM process for each session or each task, you can say. Then our DTM process takes care about all the details that has been defined in particular sessions. So whatever thing has to be done, that will done through DTM. So the actual data transfer process that is carried by DTM process. So once the DTM is been done, so it will give you some output to load manager. Based upon that, it will give the status, whether it is success, failure, that the completion of the load, it will mark as for the completion of the DTM process. So now what all the task is there for DTM? So DTM basically it fetches the details through repository service, and it validate these things, and it will create some variable if it is required and mentioned in this particular task, and it will create the session log, task log, because it is up to the task only, because it will not create the workflow log. Workflow log is the higher level that is carried, the task is being done through load manager. Now this is about DTM is all about the task level job. So the number of jobs running on each and every node, or the number of tasks running in each and every node, each task will have different DTM process running. So that DTM process will takes care about the session log, validation of the session code page, and what is the pre-session command, post-session command are there, and what are the connection object has been defined, that is the permission for that, and it will read the details like what queries has been defined in the mapping, what is the reader, what is the writer, which file, what is the DB connection, and what are the transformation has been defined, what is the logic about it, how it will translate that logic to the query if it is defined in the lookup or somewhere. And then after calculating all the details, gather all the informations, it will create and different threads, and through these threads it can start transforming the data and loading or reading the data. Once that is done, each thread has been completed, then it will perform the post session or post cell command if it is defined, or any post email that has been defined in your particular task. Once that is done, then the task will send in completion status to your respective load manager. So load manager basically it manages the loads, and DTM process is basically it manages the data transfer from one medium to another medium. Now this is about our load process and how the ETL has been used for the data transfer, and what is the major component about load manager and DTM process. Then I'll just give you a brief idea regarding node and domain. What I explained here today, the DTM process, it will take care about each task in individual nodes, right? So uh, most of people may be confused about domain and node. So let me clear it out again. So domain is just a collection of nodes. Suppose we have node 1, node 2, node 3, node 4, node 5. Okay, so we can within collection of each and every node, we can make a combination one single unit or name. For example, you can say one project will have one common name, but within that project the different technologies can be used, right? So it's a group, right? Multiple teams can be there, a part of a team project, and multiple different QA team or some other UAT team, or yeah, or production team, or some maybe operation teams. The different teams can be clubbed together in a common umbrella that's called a project, right? So similarly, domain is a collection of nodes, different nodes here, and the node is just a executor part where the job will be executed. There is no physical unit of node, but as you are installing a particular Informatica is a kind of a server-based application, so you need to install Informatica on either Unix or Windows application. So when you install Informatica, you have to define what is the domain name for it. So you cannot have a particular Informatica without having a domain. So you have to define a particular unique name for as for your project, for example. So similarly, you have to define a particular domain name where you will have all the configurations and all the details has been defined over there. So once the domain has been defined, now for your requirement, if you are installing multiple machines to execute the job for a load balancer, suppose I have to install Informatica in all the 5 nodes so that I can run the job parallelly in 5 nodes. So when I install in the first node, I have to define a particular domain name. Suppose this is a domain host, you can give, suppose domain host. This is the name of our domain. Now, once you have defined this domain, now for the second installation, if you want to join these nodes into this particular domain, you have to define this domain host name as a domain name for each and every node while installing. So you can have multiple different node name that will ask to define, but you have to give the same domain name and domain gateway information. And another part, if you remember in the previous session, as when I told you regarding the host gateway part, that load balancing for the domains or domain part, like the high availability concept it is. So you can mark each node, uh, maybe not each node, if it's like few nodes, if you want to have few high configuration of only 1 or 2 machines, that you can define as a gateway node. So this gateway node properties you can enable while installing for each node. So if you click by default for the first node, it will be Y. The second node, you can suppose we choose N. Then third node, we choose N. Then for the fourth node, we choose S. Then for fifth node, which is N. Now what will happen? Suppose for some issue, maybe due to the power failure or maybe some server crash, we don't have this node one is available. Then all the domain configurations thing will be passed on to the node 4 and our jobs can run easy. So this is called a high availability concept, HA concept about uh, say domain, right? So this HA high availability concept of the domain, it will make your server to be available 24/7. Yeah, but there will be a glitch. So few jobs can be failed, that we need to handle through our job designing part. Because it will be to switch the server, it may need few minutes, right? 5 minutes, 10 minutes. That would be the downtime that is there for every system. So that has to be handled. If you're designing job, you have to design the job in that manner. It can be restart easily, or it can be handled in a proper manner. Now, this is about high availability concept of the domain. So each Informatica server has 2 processes running. One is a worker process and one is domain configuration process. So there is nothing called or grouped as a worker process or domain configuration process. It's just about if it's the internal part of the Informatica server. So when you define gateway node equal to Y, while installing. So that will enable the domain configuration processes to run on that machine. It is there is nothing few process name that we can define as like a domain configuration process or worker process. So worker process basically if a node is been installed with the Informatica and it is connected to a domain, so we can call it a worker processes running on that, and we have defined we can create integration service on top of that, and we can run the jobs on that. Now, what is high availability concept of uh, jobs that we're running? So there is something called grid. So it will enable your high availability concept and load balancing. So now, I will say in the integration service as the load balancer, right? So if you define, if you create a grid, there is a option to create a grid. You can select node one. Suppose I create a grid one, grid prod in the name. Then I can define, I can give the input as a number of machines into it. So node one, node two, node three, node 4. Suppose I define only node until node 4 and into a grid, and I create an integration service on top of it, service on grid. So while creating integration service, it will ask you to choose the server. Either you can select an individual server. If you are selecting individual server for high availability thing, so you can select a backup server to that. That is the call of high availability of the integration service. So now about grid. So if you select the grid to create an integration service on top of grid, so now there will be options to have like multiple jobs can run on simultaneously on multiple nodes. So when you say multiple jobs on multiple nodes, so what it will happen? So it can based upon the load balancer, it can split your reader thread and writer thread. So one DTM process can be, see, integration service takes care about load and transfer the data, right? So it has load balancer, it has load manager, and it has DTM processes also, which will be kicked off by load manager. So now, if you create the integration service on top of grid, so a combination of the all capacities of the all nodes will be clubbed together and will come as a one unit. So now it is about integration service, how it is running the job. It will create, when you run a job, a particular session, you can split the session task into multiple nodes as well. So if there is a property in session, so we'll see that later sessions. Through that, you can split your in particular sessions multiple threads, one thread into one task. So it is not up to you to select individual threads to run on individual machines. You just need to select a checkbox. Then integration service will take care about it, and it will split the data transfer thing into separate nodes that is available in the grid. So that is about integration service and on the grid, and about the high availabilities of the domain as well as integration service of the nodes. Now I'll show you these properties, few details in my admin console. Okay, and we can go through it one time. So this is about my admin console that I shown you previously also. So if you see here in the domain properties, so there is only one node because it's a one machine. So I have installed in Windows. So I have one machine, so I don't have any other machines. If I have, and it should be shown here, and the gateway node will show here. And as per this dispatch mode, the processes will be move into the multiple domains, multiple node that is available to pick up the process as a domain configuration process. And that is the thing about domain. And then let's talk about integration service. In integration service, if you edit it, this one. See, here you can see it's a backup. It's asking for the backup node. I don't have any backup node available, so it is not showing. If it, I would have that in nodes configured to this particular domain, so I must see here when selecting this option. Okay, so that is one thing about the integration service backup part. And as I shown you here, right? So it is showing the grid also. So you can select particular grid option if you have that grid to create. So let's quickly create one grid. And so I cannot have multiple nodes, but I can show you to having one nodes how to create. So let's create this one new. So you can create grid. Okay, so give a grid one option. Okay, and here you can browse the number of nodes available. Only I have one node, so that is showing here, or else you can have add all. That's all. So that's all about the grid part. As it is combined, right? So you see the two machines are showing here. So you can create another integration service as well. Let's create another integration service on top of this grid. So here you just need to select the license. Okay, as it is on grid, so you just need to create a grid here. Yeah, so this option is enabled for everything. Suppose whatever machine you have defined in the grid, these are not available, then you can select a backup node also, or a backup grid also, to have that to take care about all these nodes. That is about our backup part. So we have to select here this our getters. Okay, so we are done with this. So it's asking for the primary node. So it's done. You can enable it. So that is about our sessions and integration service and grid. Okay. So thank you guys. So we're done with the session now. From the next session, we'll see for new things about Informatica. So please uh, go through my channel and have more learning part in the Informatica side, and keep liking and sharing this channel as well. Thank you.